Good morning. So let's get started. Today, we're going to be doing a practice exercise for something that is going to be structured similarly to the final exam. Okay, so this is a question that has sort of a primary issue and then some other sub issues that you'll need to identify and discuss. In order to give you guys an opportunity to sort of have a meaningful conversation about this, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes and let you talk through this with one another, and then we'll reconvene and we'll work through it as a larger group. So before we do that, I'm going to put the problem into the chat so that you have it handy. So 1 second. And there's a little bit more. So that is everything. Okay. So Tom was the fee simple owner of Firefly, a beachfront villa. The villa also houses a bed and breakfast for tourists. In 2010, he told his niece, Catherine, that she could live with him at Firefly rent-free for as long as she desired, provided she assisted him with the cooking for the tourists and did the necessary repairs to the villa. Tom explained to Catherine that he was unable to pay her as much as she earned in her previous job. Catherine gave up her job as a live-in helper, which paid very well, and moved into Firefly. Catherine was afraid of burglars, so she installed a high-tech security system at Firefly. Tom was present when Catherine had the security system installed. Catherine also installed new windows to the guest rooms at Firefly because the old windows were damaged in a storm in 2013. The installation was very costly. Catherine had discussed these repairs with Tom before repairing the windows. At that time, Tom told her to go ahead. Tom sells the Firefly to Jim. Jim has served Catherine with a notice to quit the Firefly. Advise Catherine. So again, as we said, we're going to take about 10 minutes in small groups where you guys are going to have a chance to talk through this amongst yourselves and kind of get an idea for what you think. And then we will reconvene and we'll work through it as a class, okay? So with that, Okay, so we've had an opportunity to talk amongst ourselves, and so we have to start by identifying the issues that matter here, right? So this is the first thing that you have to deal with is what are the issues that Catherine needs to be advised on. So what do you guys think is the most important issue in this problem?
I guess the issues would be, can I go ahead?
Sorry, Amanda, my speakers were turned down fairly low. Go ahead.
I guess the issues would be trying to figure out if the improvements that she made to the property, I guess that's where the issues would stem from in terms of know that he's trying to pass it over to somebody else. I guess the person is not pleased with the improvements that she did, that Catherine did.
I mean, okay. I guess for me, I don't really see anything in the facts that suggests that there's anything that Jim has expressed an opinion about these improvements. Right? There's no, he doesn't seem to care one way or the other. He just wants her gone. Mm-hmm. Right? So Adelia says, does Catherine have a claim in adverse possession? Well, let's look at the facts. Has she resided? Has she occupied the property for the statutory time period?
Sir, good morning. That was actually my issue statement. Is it too general?
Well, I mean, I'm saying, okay, let's roll with this. Let's see where it goes. So has Catherine lived there for the statutory period?
Okay, I don't remember the years for all the jurisdictions, but I know that the answer to that question would depend on the jurisdiction that's selected.
I agree. What is the shortest time period? Does anyone remember from yesterday? 10 years, right. So if she's in the 10-year jurisdiction, which is Barbados, then maybe she's occupied for the statutory period. Anywhere else, we can set aside adverse possession. So since I haven't told you in the problem where this is, you should assume that issues that turn on where you are not going to be not going to be things that you need to analyze, right? If I want you to review something that's being written if you are being tasked with analyzing an issue that has jurisdiction-specific components, you will be told what jurisdiction you're in. Okay. Otherwise, you need to be focused on issues that sort of cut across jurisdictions, where the law is treated similarly sort of throughout the Caribbean. right? There may be small differences here and there, but not big ones, okay? Okay. So do we still think that we need to continue the adverse possession? Is the issue related to contractual licenses and equity? Alyssa asks. Well, why would you think that it has something to do with licenses or equity?
I'm not sure, but when I was reading, can you hear me though?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So when I was reviewing licenses, I remember it has something to say when you have for contractual license, so it's when you have been allowed to be on the property for some period of time or something like that. So I was thinking because she was allowed to work there, her uncle had allowed her to work there for, I can't recall how long, but he had said as long as she had wanted to. And then also the equity prevents contractual licenses from having adverse. So equity would come into being willing to break contractual licenses and having adverse results. Or maybe her being fired. That's what my thought process was going. I'm not sure though.
So you've reached the right answer, right? This is a question that is mostly about licenses. And I don't want to, like, you didn't do anything wrong in getting to that answer, but an easy concerned about in this fact pattern, right? If I had just been told you have to leave, what would my first question be? Well, what would my first question be? Right, Rakisha, exactly right. Now, in the real world, let's just sort of pause and talk about the difference between, a law school exam and the real world. In the real world, Catherine's most likely reaction is to go, where am I going to live now, right? And to start looking for a new place to live, because she's very likely not going to have the time or the resources to fight Jim over this, okay? But Rakisha's absolutely right. In a law school exam, we can argue over issues that in the real world we would set aside because of resource constraints. And so absolutely, Catherine's question is, wait, do I have to leave at all? Can I stay instead? Okay. So, what does Jim have the right to throw her out? So Keandra says that she thinks the occupation was related to Catherine's work. Why does that matter, Keandra?
Good morning. Sir, I'm thinking that, the uncle allowed her to stay with him, but so long as, she helped out with the tourists and the food and all that. So if she's not working, then I don't see how she's allowed to stay. But that's just my thought process. I'm not sure if I'm right.
Well, how would we characterize that relationship? Right? What's going on here? What is being brought to the table here in this relationship? I don't know what you mean by that, Tiffany. And this is not really directed at Tiffany in particular, but like, I don't have, I can't read your minds. So when you answer, if I ask a question, it's, I don't know what the answer, Tiffany, is I don't know what you're saying. So you're going to have to explain it. Well, I'm sorry if I got a little abrupt just now, and I am sorry for that.
Hi, sir. No, please, it's no issue. I was just guessing, honestly. So I
Fair
understand.
enough. That's fine. I just, okay.
Okay, wait, sir, I have a problem. Well, a question. Well, regarding to Tiffany, because she said, well, the statement said, for as long as she desired assisted, as far as long as she desired, provided she assisted with Tom and the tourists and all that. So I think Tiffany was trying to ask if it's a fee simple subject to condition subsequent. Is that what she's trying to say?
Okay. So if that's what's
Right.
being,
That's what he was trying to say.
okay. So if that's being done, right, then what's missing for it to be a fee simple subject to condition subsequent? Okay.
Sir, I don't really understand when you say what's missing, because I did not even realize that it could have been that, because I didn't think she possessed it.
What, say that again, Adelia?
I'm not understanding what you mean by what's missing for it to become a condition subsequent. So you're saying that something has to happen or stop happening? That's what
Well,
you're
no,
asking?
what did you say?
Before,
Yes.
I was saying I didn't know it would be a condition subsequent, because I don't think she started possessing it per se, as in correctly possessing it.
And yeah, and I see here in the chat, Rakisha is saying something very similar, right? But that's exactly right. Both Adelia and Rakisha are exactly right that the properties never actually transferred here, right? This is like basically Tom is bringing in a roommate as an employee, right? And the other piece of this, right, is even if Tom didn't live in the Firefly, right? Well, I say that. Let me see if that's reflected in the facts. Yeah. He lives there. She could live with him at Firefly. even if Tom wasn't living there, you still don't have a transfer of the property because there's no writing. Okay, so the statute of fraud says that to transfer an interest in land, it has to be done in writing. You can't transfer land with your mouth. Okay, so so there's no way that Catherine could be the owner of the property. And so there's a couple of chat comments in the chat that I ignored because we were sort of working through this, but Rakisha and Alyssa are sort of raising I think the right issue, right? So what we have here between Tom and Catherine is a contract, right? We have mutuality of obligation. We have each side promising to do something. And we don't have a transfer of property here. So what we have is some sort of contract. And Rakisha and Alyssa are correct that with a contractual license, Catherine has no legal rights whatsoever, right? Tom could have revoked the license at any point, and all that would have meant is that Catherine would have been relieved of her obligations to perform, and Jim doesn't even have the contract, right? He wasn't even a party to the agreement. So so I think this is going down the right path. How can Catherine minimize the harm to her? So Alyssa asks, shouldn't she benefit from her investments in the property? I mean, probably, but how can we get there? How can we achieve, what's the logic that can get us to that point? Okay, so Rakisha says through equity, which is correct, but you gotta actually walk us through the logic here, right? So how can equity enable Catherine to benefit from her investments in the property? Go ahead, Darren.
So if she, I don't think that she owns shares in the property for the life estate, but if she did, would that allow her to be part of the remainder then?
Well, there's no life estate here. Like we're not, there is no life estate, there is no future interests. Tom held in fee simple. He sold to Jim, presumably Jim, he sold everything he had. So none of that even plays a role here. So how can we use equity to make sure that Catherine isn't cheated out of all the money and energy that she's sunk into this property over the years? Okay, so Tiffany is raising a really good point that the two installations that we know of, right, being the security system and the new windows, are arguably fixtures. Now, without going through a full fixtures analysis, we're not going to be able to say that definitively, but they certainly look like fixtures, okay? And Tiffany's absolutely right that fixtures transfer with the property, okay? So I don't think that we can use a fixtures analysis to get Catherine any relief at this point in the facts. But can we make an equitable argument that would give us room for that? Let's see, there's a couple of comments in the okay, so so these are all really great questions, right? Darren asks, is it just a matter of notice? And certainly that is one equitable remedy that a court could order, that there are cases suggesting that that's an appropriate remedy, where instead of Jim being able to provide an immediate notice to quit, he has to provide 6 months or a year's notice, basically to soften the blow and give Catherine some time to get her affairs in order and move out. Rakisha raises a really good point, which is that licensors are not permitted to revoke licenses under a contract where there's a specific purpose or period. I think that is I think that's a harder argument to make for a couple of reasons, and there's a couple of reasons. The first one is you point out that the period in question is not specific, and equity is going to be really skeptical about providing relief that is potentially infinite in scope or in time, right? If equity can't sort of define the boundaries of the relief that it's providing, equity is going to be nervous about, the equitable powers of the court are not going to be likely to be invoked. You're absolutely right on the purpose, right? Is that this license is to serve a particular purpose. And so that prong of your analysis, I agree with. The other concern that I have about the argument that Rakisha makes is that Jim is not the licensor, right? Jim is a subsequent purchaser. On these facts, as they've been given to you, could he be a bona fide purchaser for value without notice? Very possibly, right? Not that it matters, because licenses are not subject to the bona fide purchaser doctrine, but he could very easily qualify under that doctrine. So I think that raising the issue of an equitable injunction on a contractual license is really helpful. I think that on these facts, Catherine likely loses on the issue of an injunction. And then Nicole asks, could Catherine claim proprietary estoppel? So let's talk about that briefly before we go. What are the elements of proprietary estoppel, right? We have promise, we have reliance, and we have detriment. So do we have a promise? Yes, right? Tom says, come here and be a living cook and handyman, and you can live here as long as you want. Was there reliance? Exactly. She quit her job and moved in. And was it to her detriment? Sorry, there's a mosquito in my office. Was it to her detriment? The notice to quit is not the detriment that we're looking for. The spending money on the property, not the because the detriment has to be at the time of the promise. Exactly. She makes less money. She took a pay cut to take this job. So we have all the elements of proprietary estoppel. Okay. These would absolutely prevent Tom from serving her a notice to quit, but they can also serve another purpose. They can serve to create an equitable lease. An equitable lease, because you can have an equitable lease by estoppel. And when if that's how we characterize this, if that's the argument we make, then Catherine has tenants' rights, and we would have to go through the fixtures analysis, and are these fixtures, and if they are they fixtures that tenants can remove, and those sorts of things, right? So do we see now, after this morning's session, what we're looking for when on these types of final exam questions, right? The idea is you got to chase down all the issues, and sometimes you have to be creative, and sometimes you have to think a little bit about what are the ways that this can go, and how can I sort of look at this from a different angle, okay? And that's not always easy, but it's an important skill to develop as you sort of continue to move into the profession. Okay. So what questions do you guys have before we call it a day? What's the outcome for Catherine? Well, she's almost certainly going to have to move out. But, you know, maybe she gets a chunk of money. That's the best. I think that's the best possible outcome for her. I don't think there's going to be an argument that lets her stay, other than maybe temporarily, right? For 6 months or a year. So, okay. What other questions? Okay, go ahead.
Really quick, just to be sure, sir. So the way we would structure this would be to talk about how there's a contractual license that may bring about proprietary estoppel between her and the uncle. Maybe mention the fact that because the contractual license does not apply to Jim, so she doesn't have anything through that route. But then talk about how she might, through equity, have remedies through the proprietary estoppel. That's how we would do it in the exam.
Yep.
Okay.
That's how you'd write it.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What other questions? Okay. Last chance. Okay, well then I will see you guys tomorrow in the lecture, and take care until then. Bye.